Let me read to you a passage from the 12th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, verses 39 to 48. It's the Gospel for Wednesday of the 29th week in Ordinary Time. St. Luke writes, Jesus said, "Understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him." Peter asked, "Lord, are you telling this parable to us or to everyone?" The Lord answered, "Who then is the faithful and wise manager, whom the master puts in charge of his servants to give them their food allowance at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whom the master finds doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose the servant says to himself, 'My master is taking a long time in coming,' and he then begins to beat the men servants and the maid servants, and to eat and drink and get drunk. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. That servant who knows his master's will and does not get ready or does not do what his master wants will be beaten with many blows. But the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked." That's from Luke chapter 12, verses 39 to 48. It speaks to us of responsibility. What do I mean? Well, I remember years ago a person saying that he wished that he hadn't been born into a Catholic family because non-Catholics had it easier. They did not have the obligations that Catholics have. The person who said this did not appreciate that the faith is a gift, and that a great gift necessarily endows responsibilities. However, his slightly ludicrous wish reminds us of a fundamental fact of life. It is that we are all inescapably and radically endowed with gifts that bring with them responsibilities. We did not choose to enter the world, for only one person did this, and he was divine. We find ourselves in existence as living, breathing human beings with the power and the requirement to choose our course. We cannot renounce this gift as if it was simply chosen by us. And if we were forcibly to extricate ourselves from life and its responsibilities by, say, suicide, all would be tragic for us. We cannot avoid the possibilities, and more fundamentally, the responsibilities flowing from our given situation. Martin Heidegger, the German philosopher, made the expression Dasein famous. We are being in time. We are in time, and this inevitably involves the responsibility for what we make of our own being. Years back, I knew a priest who, before he died in Spain, said that he was grateful to God for the gift of life. He had used his life well and fully, and it had been the source of blessings for very many others. As each person finds himself with his gifts of life, or circumstances and vocation, he must take responsibility for the use he makes of these gifts. If he does not, his life will be a tragedy, as it will if he positively chooses the path of evil. He must take cognizance of the life and gifts with which he has been endowed, and resolve to pursue the path of good. He is placed in the stream of time, and when that time is cut short, the quality of his being will be his own unavoidable responsibility. the fruit of his own choices. In time, and due to his choices, for he cannot but choose, he will be either good or bad. So he must take himself in hand and use his freedom to become all that he should be. It is imperative that he become and do good. Let us remember the words uttered by Jesus Christ at the Last Supper, that it would have been better had his betrayer never been born. Mark 14, verse 21. In our Gospel today, our Lord refers to the seriousness of our responsibilities. He begins by giving a brief illustration. The householder cares for his house, and if he knows the hour the burglar will come, he will prevent the break-in. So too, we must constantly stand ready at our responsibilities, for we do not know the hour of the Son of Man's arrival. Now this illustration that our Lord gives came at the end of a long passage of teaching, Luke chapter 12 verses 22 to 40, that was directed to his disciples, as we see in chapter 12 verse 22. He had earlier been speaking to a person in the crowd, Luke chapter 12 verses 13 to 21, warning against greed. He then turned to his disciples to speak of dependence on God and constant readiness for the arrival of the Master. At this, Luke reports, Simon Peter interrupted. "Is this point meant for us or for all?" he asked. That is to say, was it meant for all his disciples, or even for all the world, or was it meant for his closest companions, the apostles who would be masters of the household that just featured in the parable? At this, our Lord speaks directly of the faithful and wise steward, whom his Lord shall make ruler over his household. So it would seem that our Lord is here speaking directly to the apostles, to those who would have a special responsibility for the men servants and the maids. Our Lord says that their privilege is an awesome responsibility for which they will be held to account. And this responsibility is unavoidable. They, especially more than the rest, must watch and act in such a way as to be ready for the Master when he returns. If they are faithful, they will be placed in charge of all the Master's possessions. But if they are not, they will be cut off and sent to the place of the unbelievers. There are different levels of awareness and responsibility, but all the Master's servants will be held to account. As we heard, that servant who knows his Master's will and does not get ready or does not do what his Master wants will be beaten with many blows. But the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. There is no avoiding the judgment of God. We must strive for holiness of life. Ultimately, and in the final analysis, we shall be either good or bad, and we, each of us, will be responsible for our end. Further, that end will be eternal. We shall be eternally good or eternally bad. We shall be eternally happy beyond description or eternally miserable beyond description. It will all depend on how I use my freedom and gifts now, this very day, tomorrow, and the next day. I am a being in time, and my time could suddenly be cut short. Then, as a human being, how shall I stand? Our Lord, now I begin.